Kidney disease. When the first wave of exhaustion hit, Michael Adams thought it was just another long week catching up to him. The double shifts at the auto shop, the late nights helping his daughter with homework, the endless cups of coffee to stay awake. But when he began waking up every morning with swollen hands and a dull ache in his lower back, he knew something wasn't right, though he couldn't quite bring himself to believe it was something serious. After all, he was only 42, strong, reliable, the kind of man who never called in sick. His wife, Jenna, noticed before he did, how pale he'd become, how the spark in his eyes had dimmed, how even laughter seemed to take effort. One afternoon, after watching him struggle to lift a tire, she finally said, "You're going to the doctor tomorrow." Michael smiled weakly and tried to brush it off, but the truth was, he was scared not of pain, but of what might happen to the family if something happened to him. When the diagnosis came, chronic kidney disease, stage 4, it felt like the world had tilted off its axis. The doctor's voice was calm but heavy, explaining numbers, charts, creatinine levels, and options that all sounded like another language. "Eventually, you'll need dialysis or a transplant," the doctor said gently, but all Michael could hear was the echo of that word, eventually, as if it were a countdown he didn't sign up for. Life became a pattern of doctor visits, blood draws, and long silences at the dinner table. His 12-year-old daughter, Lily, started leaving little notes on his nightstand. "You're my hero, Dad, or we'll beat this together." Jenna tried to stay strong, working extra hours at the diner, smiling for him even when tears brimmed in her eyes as she washed the dishes late at night. The bills piled up like snowdrifts, and Michael, who had always been the rock of his family, began to crumble inside under the weight of helplessness. Dialysis started 3 months later, 3 sessions a week, each one leaving him drained and dizzy, but he kept pretending it was fine. He'd joke with the nurses, talk about football, anything to make them forget he was dying a little each day. One morning, sitting in the sterile dialysis center, surrounded by the quiet hum of machines and the faint antiseptic smell that clung to everything, Michael met Sam, a retired teacher with kind eyes and a quick wit. Sam had been on dialysis for 5 years, and despite it all, he seemed at peace. "You get used to the needles," Sam said on their first day sitting side by side. "You don't get used to missing your life, though. That part never stops hurting." The two became friends quickly, sharing stories about their families, their favorite music, even their regrets. Sam had no children, but he talked about his former students as if they were his own, proud of the small ways he'd shaped their lives. "You know what I learned?" Sam said one afternoon, his voice soft as they both watched the sun through the window. "The world doesn't owe us miracles. But sometimes, we become someone else's." A year passed, and Michael's condition worsened. His name was added to the transplant list, but the wait felt endless, thousands of people ahead of him, each hoping for the same miracle. His energy faded, and his hope dimmed, though he tried to hide it behind a brave smile for Jenna and Lily. One night, after tucking Lily into bed, she whispered, "Daddy, if you ever need one of my kidneys, you can have it." He laughed softly, kissed her forehead, and said, "That's not how it works, sweetheart. But thank you." Yet her words lingered in his mind like a fragile promise he didn't deserve. Then came the call that would change everything, but not in the way he expected. Sam didn't show up for his dialysis session one morning. When Michael asked about him, the nurse hesitated before saying, "He was admitted to the hospital last night. Complications." That night, Michael sat on his porch, watching the stars, silently praying for his friend. A few days later, he got the news. Sam had passed away peacefully in his sleep. Michael wept for the first time in months, grief mixing with guilt and gratitude for having known someone who taught him how to find grace in suffering. He went to Sam's funeral, a small gathering of old colleagues and neighbors. As the pastor spoke about a life of quiet kindness, Michael felt something stir deep within him, a realization that every moment we're given, no matter how hard, is a chance to give something back. A week later, Michael received an unexpected phone call from the transplant coordinator. "Mr. Adams," the voice said, "we have a potential donor match." His heart nearly stopped. When he asked who it was, the coordinator hesitated, then said softly, "The donor's family asked to remain anonymous, but, I think you should know, his name was Samuel Green." Michael dropped the phone, his knees giving way as he sank to the floor. Sam, his friend, his mentor, had chosen to donate his kidney after death, giving Michael the second chance he'd stopped believing in. The surgery happened 2 weeks later. When Michael woke up in the hospital, groggy and weak, Jenna was holding his hand, tears streaming down her face. "You're going to be okay," she whispered. "You're really going to be okay." Recovery was slow, but every day felt like a miracle. The color returned to his cheeks, his laughter came easier, and for the first time in years, food actually tasted like joy. He wrote a letter to Sam's estate, pouring his heart into every word. "You didn't just save my life, you reminded me how to live it." He promised to honor Sam's memory, to live with gratitude, to give as selflessly as Sam had. Months later, Michael began volunteering at the very dialysis center where he had once sat in despair, bringing coffee and conversation to new patients who were just beginning their own difficult journeys. He listened, comforted, and sometimes just sat in silence with them, knowing how much that could mean. One day, a young man named Alex, barely 20, walked into the center looking terrified. He'd been diagnosed only weeks earlier and had no family nearby. Michael sat beside him, smiling gently. "I've been where you are," he said. "You're stronger than you think." The two talked for hours, and when Alex asked how Michael found hope, he told him about Sam. Not just about the kidney, but about the friendship, the laughter, the small acts of humanity that made life bearable even when it hurt. "He gave me his kidney," Michael said quietly, "but the real gift was how he made me believe people are still good." Years passed. Michael watched Lily grow into a kind, determined young woman who decided to study nursing, inspired by what her father had gone through. Jenna often teased him, saying, "You've turned into a softie," and he'd laugh because it was true. He'd learned that strength wasn't about never breaking, it was about opening your heart even when it might hurt. On the anniversary of Sam's death each year, Michael visited his grave with a small bouquet of lilies, his daughter's favorite flower, and whispered, "You still live here," pressing a hand to his chest. Then one spring morning, nearly a decade after his transplant, Michael received a letter from a woman named Claire Green, Sam's niece. She had found his old thank you letter in a box of her uncle's things and wanted to meet. They met at a small coffee shop by the lake. Claire was in her 30s, with the same warm eyes Sam had. "My uncle talked about you," she said, her voice trembling. "He said you reminded him of why he taught, that you never gave up, even when life was unfair." Tears filled Michael's eyes. "He saved me," he said simply. "I owe him everything." Claire smiled through her own tears. "He always believed kindness was the only thing worth leaving behind." Looks like he was right. They sat for hours, sharing stories, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. Before leaving, Claire handed him an old photograph, Sam at a picnic table, holding a book, smiling at the camera. On the back, in faded ink, were 5 words, "Be the reason someone smiles." Michael framed the photo and hung it in his workshop, right above the spot where he rebuilt old engines for fun. Every time he looked at it, he was reminded that even the smallest gestures of kindness can ripple outward in ways we may never see. In time, Michael's story spread through their small town. Local papers wrote about him, schools invited him to speak, and even strangers reached out to share their own stories of giving and receiving. He always began the same way, "I'm alive today because of a man who believed in kindness." He never exaggerated or dramatized, it was just the truth. He spoke about the importance of becoming an organ donor, of loving deeply, of finding purpose in the face of pain. After one of his talks, a young woman approached him, tears glistening in her eyes. "My brother's on the transplant list," she said. "I was scared before, but now I think I understand. Hope doesn't die when people care." Michael hugged her, whispering, "That's all any of us can do, care enough to keep hope alive." Years later, when Michael was much older and his hands had grown unsteady, he still spent his mornings walking by the lake, breathing in the crisp air, feeling the rhythm of life pulsing inside him. Not just his own, but Sam's, a reminder that compassion is the most enduring heartbeat of all. Lily had become a nurse at the same hospital where her father once lay waiting for a miracle, and every time she helped a frightened patient, she thought of the chain of kindness that had started long before her. When Michael passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, his family gathered to honor him. In his will, he had made one simple request, to donate his organs, just as Sam had done. The doctor later told Jenna that his liver and corneas had gone on to help 2 people. And so the circle continued, one act of kindness begetting another, like light passing from one candle to the next. At his memorial, Lily stood before a crowd of friends, patients, and strangers whose lives her father had touched. Holding the same photograph of Sam that had hung in her father's workshop, she said, "My dad used to tell me that some people leave behind money, others leave behind memories, but the best people, the truly extraordinary ones, leave behind love. And love never dies." The crowd fell silent, many wiping tears from their eyes. She smiled then, the kind of smile that comes from both grief and gratitude. "If my father taught me anything," she continued, "it's that humanity isn't about what we take from life, it's about what we give back." As the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, casting the world in hues of gold and rose, a quiet peace seemed to settle over everyone gathered. Jenna placed the lilies by Michael's headstone and whispered, "You kept your promise. You lived gratefully." Somewhere, perhaps beyond what words can reach, the spirit of Sam smiled too, his legacy living on not in grand gestures, but in the countless small kindnesses born from one selfless act. And so the story of a man with kidney disease became something far greater, a story of friendship, compassion, and the unbreakable chain of generosity that connects us all. Because in the end, the truest measure of a life isn't how long it lasts, but how deeply it touches others. And somewhere in the gentle rhythm of two hearts that once beat as one, the echo of kindness kept the world alive.